Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de what I consider some reasonable steps or arguments against the very common scenario where people nearing their fire goal talk themselves out of retiring early simply because they feel like now all of a sudden perhaps they need to work just one more year because, some real weird stuff could happen that'll derail their cozy early retirement plans. Yeah. Ale. Zempak here. I'm fairly knee-deep in the fire echo chamber because, well, I think it's fun. There's one recurring topic, though, that I haven't really addressed, and that's that mental trap that it's the mental trap of one more year, though, right? That's very common on any fire social media, internet spheres. Now, look, I understand this mentality totally, right? People usually come up with a fire number when they are in that original plan mode, when they first learn about fire, and over time, as life changes and circumstances change, that fire number tend to creep up. And I saw, by the way, this rant is prompted by this particular question that I will link below. Basically, on Reddit, OP is asking how people got over that hump, right? So today, I think what I want to do, what I want to address is some common scenarios that keeps the fire people up at night, especially when it seems like the goalpost could continuously, shift indefinitely, okay? These common scenarios are like, number one, what if the market crashes right when I retire? Number two, what if healthcare costs gets even more insane or inane than it is now? Number three, shouldn't I kind of prepare for more money so that I won't be sweating over expenses? I think I can reasonably address these three. It'll make it much easier to answer that overall question of how to get that mindset where it's not scary to pull the plug on that regular paycheck. Because I get it. It's scary to not get that paycheck. Because for the most of us, that was the regular default option for a decade or two. Okay, I've gone through it, and I recall how weird it was in year 1 or 2 of early retirement, and I got over it. So I can confidently say it's all doable because I've done it. Okay, yeah. Anyway, if you're intrigued by what I might say, please subscribe, like, comment, share, all that social media buzzwords. Or do whatever you want, okay? Because I'm rich enough for me, and I'll be great regardless. Okay, so first question to counter. What if the market goes really bad once you pull the plug immediately, right? Now, I think it's understandable source of anxiety. This is basically anxiety over a sequence of return risk, right? And anyone who's spent any time in the fire threads are already aware of this risk. It boils down to if you get unlucky and you are stubborn about your withdrawal rate, the first few years, the damage it does right in the beginning could really crater your long-term prospects, right? But there is a way to counter sequence of return risk, and people with fire threats talk about it all the time. Good Lord, just have an unusually large emergency fund that, for example, covers a few years of living expenses. So that would solve your problem, this particular problem anyway, immediately. You don't crater your decades-long investment returns if you're not actually converting investments into cash during such a market correction at all, of course. There is the opportunity cost of having a bunch of cash equivalent on deck rather than having it being invested. But that's the compromise right then and there, right? If you're really, really worried that the market could correct right when you are about to retire, then keep 3 to 4 years of your bare minimum living expenses on hand. I say the minimum because if the market does crash, I'll bet anyone money that most fire folks will contract their spend and not be living it up during those specific type of times. And say if you do retire with 4 years of expenses and the market actually feels normal, nothing's wrong, well, it's pretty easy to adjust your spending upwards by liquidating assets to complement your bare bones budget, right? Don't have to live minimally if nothing's wrong, right? But keep that cash pool relatively high is the solution that would sidestep that immediate market correction or crash scenario entirely, okay? Second point, what if healthcare costs, especially from the US, gets even more kooky? This is a real concern, at least where I am. I'm in a red state in the USA, a southern state, right? This one really bugs me because I refuse to be held hostage to a boring corporate job simply because of insurance. I think that's silly and absurd. I don't buy into that BS. My solution, of course, it's geographic arbitrage, aka medical tourism. Sorry, that's not a great solution, but it exists as an option if you're coming from the richest country in the world that allows most people the flexibility to get to financial freedom to begin with. Because also, remember, in literally every other country in the world, even in some of the ones that are considered developing countries, healthcare is simply not viewed as some sort of sword dangling over normal people's heads as if it's some kind of corporate blackmail to keep workers in line. That's only as absurd as it is a US only, okay? So moving will mitigate your healthcare costs. Of course, I'm not saying that this reason is easy to do. It's an option that exists for Americans. We already do this to some smaller extents, right? Some people go for cheaper drugs or non-emergency stuff to Mexico. And if you do your internet research, you can find even more places that can easily accommodate people who spends the most powerful of currencies, that US dollar. And frankly, moving to a foreign land will also increase your capacity to empathize with, the others and make us generally a better people. Okay, so a tangential bonus in that regard. Okay, now this last point, I think the OP brought up, kind of cracked me up a bit, right? Because he says he has barely done any, lifestyle inflation, but then went on to say, oh, but in my retirement, I would like to book business class on international flights and book nice hotels without thinking about it. So I'm going to extrapolate this point into the idea that they just don't want to look at price tags for most things, right? Not like when they were in the accumulation stage, getting to FIRE, once they've gotten to FIRE, right? My solution is that I've got bad news for you, bro. People who get to FIRE through financial discipline, those people will never be able to turn that switch off suddenly and completely, okay? Case in point, me, of course. My net worth has gone up 7 figures, okay? Since I've left the regular job. Guess what? I'm no more comfortable spending on large ticket items now than before when I had a real regular job. I still price compare at the supermarket. Why would I ever pay for a branded oatmeal if the store version is right next to it and cheaper, saving me a whole quarter per package? Yeah, so what got you there won't suddenly, or even likely ever, go away. And that's not a bad thing at all, okay? It'll keep our decision-making from falling into the normal consumerist trap and therefore, in most cases, out of debt and failure. By the way, unless you grew up with business class flights, in that example, by the way, that is lifestyle inflation, right? It's just not the same as, let's say, all of a sudden you're getting all the streaming subscriptions, right? Because wanting plane tickets that are 5x the normal price on average, that counts as well, okay? So just recognize that you are inflating in some ways. There's nothing wrong with that, but it is inflation, right? It's just not regular daily life inflation, but it is. Sorry. In conclusion, of course, we'd all like to be a little richer, but not market, not healthcare, not self-delusion about, whether you're gonna have a mentality shift should keep you from the immense joy of actually pulling the plug. That's how it was for me anyway. I was always afraid of a correction, but not enough to keep that giant emergency stash that I talked about, right? Because I much rather have the upside of betting big, having that money invested. I also worried about healthcare, but when you retire early, which is relatively young and hopefully relatively healthy, it's pretty easy to get the cheapest insurance because no one uses it when you're not an old senior person. And having been there, by the way, in this early retirement for almost a decade now, I learned that I'll probably never not care about prices because that's the winning formula that got me here to begin with. So it's nothing to be ashamed of, but just remember, the longer you wait, the more probability of regret you'll have for not having left that corporate job earlier. Because I've never heard anybody who said, oh no, I left too early. Only those who said, I should have left earlier. So yeah, am I off my rockers? Please feel free to yell at me below. Or whatever, okay? Cheers. A la prochaine.